I think when I was reading, and you bring the story of Frederick Douglass and another scientist, who were
Mhm.
talking about. I mean, do I not? I mean, yes, I'm in black skin. I have different hair texture. I mean,
Yeah,
let me ask you a personal question, because
sure.
at one point you write about how your daughter looks at rats, and your
Yeah,
grandmother,
yeah,
how she looked at rats.
yeah.
Now, you're a philosopher, your wife is also a philosopher,
Mhm.
and you both are raising a daughter. How does your understanding of race relations, how does your understanding the world has actually contributed in understanding your daughter's worldview, about race in
Ah,
American
right.
context?
Well, I'm not sure. So my
Hmm.
daughter is from a previous marriage,
Okay.
and uh, I was less involved with these issues when she was young.
Okay.
Um, Now, I have the same sensibilities. I mean,
Hmm.
uh, it's very, very important. There are important pieces of my own history
Hmm.
right here. I grew up in the Deep South in the 1950s and 60s. It was the Jim Crow era. Everything was segregated. So I was exposed to these things. But my family moved from New York City to the Deep South. So I wasn't part of the culture, right?
Hmm.
It hadn't been, it hadn't colonized my mind, particularly also as my mother was the daughter of Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, so a child growing up in those circumstances just can't help seeing there's something terribly, terribly, terribly wrong.
Hmm.
Um, Now, my grandparents' influence on me, because a lot of my childhood, I was in an extended family,
Hmm.
um, was profound. Especially my grandmother, who was a self-educated woman. She had to leave school in her early teens.
Hmm.
Her father had abandoned the family. Her mother was dead, so she had to go to work. But she was a brilliant, self-educated woman, and she was particularly interested in and knowledgeable about the history of racism,
Hmm.
anti-Semitism, and so on. And I, of course, every every Jewish family, at least of that generation, there are stories about the things that happened, in the old country. Um, so in other words, I grew up with this sensibility that racism is prevalent and dangerous and terrible. And I'm sure this fed into the way I brought up my children.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Thank you, David. I mean, I was thinking at that point, because in another book you write about your own father's and story, that
Yeah,
where he came from, and his love interest with a woman of color, and how it
yeah,
made your grandfather very anxious.
yeah, yeah. They sent him away. This is, he grew up in Brazil with a missionary family. He fell
Mm.
in love with a black teenager and immediately sent him to South Carolina to prevent something terrible from happening.
Exactly. The fear of black
Yes.
body. I mean, I am one of my very good friends and a professor, an African Canadian. He researched for a very long time the idea of interracial marriage in Canadian context, and understanding that the disposability of black bodies, that how black body, particularly black male body,
Yeah.
is conceptualized as a sexual being. And he writes, he coins the term phallic fantastic, is that,
Yeah.
oh, all of the black man's essence in his penis.
Yes.
And what I found particularly very troubling reading his book is called Appalling, because appealing because he's appalling, that in
Yeah.
the United States, more black men, not black women, are sexually attacked.
Oh, yes. Yes.
This bends my mind.
Yeah,
Is
I
that?
mean, if you haven't come across it, my friend Tommy Curry's work is all about this. He's a very controversial man. His book is called "The Man Not." It's hyphenated, the man not.
Oh, I
Uh,
definitely have to look into it.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, his work is really, really important
Yeah.
on basically the rape of black males, male children, often
Yeah.
actually by women.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and there's another one which I can recommend. I just read. It's a very powerful book. I'm trying to remember the author. It's called
Mm-hmm.
Reconsidering Rufus. It's
Mm-hmm.
a it's an historical study about
Mm-hmm.
the sexual exploitation and
Mm-hmm.
abuse of enslaved black men.
Yeah. And
It's fantastic.
I often when I show this book, for any of the readers, if you want to read this book, it's called "Appealing Because He is Appalling."
Okay.
And in this book, and this is what a lot of the times I think it boggles my own mind, is that how in the United States the highest number of sexual assault recorded is on black men, then black women,
Hmm.
and then white women. And
Yeah.
this gives me an idea that how racialization is used to dehumanize. Now,